On June 26, 2015, the Supreme Court ruled that it's unconstitutional to deny marriage to homosexuals, and suffice to say, not everyone took it well. In Rowan County, Kentucky, a county clerk by the name of Kim Davis refused to issue marriage licenses to gay couples because of her religious belief that marriage is only between one man and one woman.
The Supreme Court denied your stay.
We are not issuing marriage licenses today. So
Based on what?
I would ask you all to
Why are you not
go
issuing marriage licenses today?
Because I'm not.
You see, as a county clerk, Kim Davis's name would have been on the license issued to gay couples, and because of her religious beliefs, she couldn't stand for that.
We're not leaving until we have a license. We're not leaving until we have a license.
Do your job.
So she went with her conscience and effectively stopped issuing marriage licenses to everybody, which resulted in a lawsuit and eventually 5 days in jail. Little did she know, a governor by the name of Mike Huckabee, who was running for president, didn't think that Kim Davis had done anything wrong. So on the day that she was released from jail, this happened.
I just want to give God the glory. His people have rallied, and you are a strong people.
It is far more than one clerk saying she will not issue marriage licenses. It's that every one of us will have to decide whether or not we want to keep this great republic or whether we're willing to sacrifice it and surrender it to tyranny. And I think we gather here today to say we will not surrender to the tyranny of one branch of government. I am willing to spend the next 8 years in the White House leading this country, but I want you to know I'm willing to spend the next 8 years in jail, but I'm not willing to spend one day under the tyranny of people who believe they can take our freedom and conscience away.
How did we go from a lone county clerk willing to disobey the law because of a personal objection to sacrificing an entire country to tyranny? Well, one of the things that Mike Huckabee mentioned was the tyranny of one branch of government. And if we're going to get to the bottom of this, let's start here. In the United States of America, there are 3 branches of government. The executive branch, which is the president living in the White House, the legislative branch, which is Congress working in the Capitol building, and finally there is the judicial branch, the head of which is the Supreme Court. And this is the branch that Mike Huckabee claims is tyrannical. So what exactly do these 3 branches have the power to do when it comes to laws? The legislative branch makes laws, the executive branch carries out laws, and the judicial branch evaluates laws. The power is effectively divided, but these are the powers that each branch has. Now the question is, did the Supreme Court go rogue and overstep their legal authority when they ruled that gay marriage is a constitutional right? What did the Supreme Court do in Obergefell versus Hodges? Well, sorry to be anticlimactic, they did exactly what the Supreme Court is supposed to do. They evaluated the law which said homosexuals could not get married, they determined that such a law is unconstitutional, and they cited the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment to back up that decision. Whether or not you agree with their decision is another matter. As far as power goes, this is what the Supreme Court has the power to do. Think of them as the referees in a football game. Congress, the president, state governments, the police can all play this game of passing and enforcing laws just as long as they're playing within the boundaries of the Constitution. The courts are there to blow the whistle when somebody steps out of bounds. And in case you think this is too much power, understand that a Supreme Court made up of different justices in the future can overturn rulings that have been made in the past. With all of this being said, why is Mike Huckabee throwing around the word tyranny?
The Supreme Court cannot make a law. They cannot make it. If we allow the judicial branch just to make up law without the people's elected representatives, you turn the Constitution into a thing of wax. And they made up a law.
Apparently, he thinks the Supreme Court did what Congress is supposed to do. Yes, of course the Supreme Court can't make a law, and that's not what they did. They ruled that any law which bans this is unconstitutional. That's not making up a law, that's interpreting the supreme law. Again, this is what the Supreme Court has the authority to do. But just for the sake of argument, let's pretend the Supreme Court snuck into the Capitol one night and made up a law. And let's even give Mike Huckabee a magic wand so he can throw out that law that we are also also pretending exists. What is Governor Huckabee's argument now? Well, he would point to Congress, of course. If we're going to legalize gay marriage, we ought to do so through the legislative branch.
This was not done through the legislative process. The legislature has to make it. The executive branch has to sign it. How do I exercise the power of the sword, which is the executive branch, without the power of the legislature? I would say when the Congress provides enabling legislation and the people's representatives vote and it gets to my desk, then we'll consider it.
Okay, let's suppose that happened. Congress passes a law that legalizes gay marriage at a federal level. Would Governor Huckabee be satisfied? Actually, no, he probably wouldn't be satisfied. At that point, he would probably wave his magic wand to throw out that law, and then argue for states' rights, that the individual states should be deciding on gay marriage.
The only law she's following is the Kentucky law, which by constitutional amendment defines marriage as a man and a woman. The state specifically requires her to fill it out with male and female, and until they change that, I don't see how you can ask her to violate what is on that form and the Kentucky Constitution, which is explicitly clear.
So now let's suppose that happened. All 50 states legalized gay marriage on their own. Let's say the Kentucky legislature passed a law that allowed homosexuals to get married. Is Mike Huckabee finally satisfied? Is this the point where he turns to Kim Davis and says, "You're on your own," as he plays the Star-Spangled Banner on the bass? Or is he going to wave that magic wand one more time?
What about county clerks? Should they issue same-sex marriage licenses?
If they have a conscientious objection, I think they should be excused.
What about county clerks? Should they issue same-sex marriage licenses?
If they have a conscientious objection, I think they should be excused. If they have a conscientious objection, I think they should be excused. I think they should be excused.
Let's get this straight. If the Supreme Court rules that gay marriage is constitutional, the argument is that it should be left up to Congress. If Congress passes a law legalizing gay marriage, the argument is that it should be left up to the states. And if the states legalize gay marriage, now the argument is that people who don't like that law should be excused from obeying the law. Okay, here's a rhetorical question. Why are we wasting our time arguing with Mike Huckabee if the man is willing to change his argument every time he gets what he wants? He's quite an unlikely person to care so much about where our laws ought to come from if he doesn't think the law needs to be followed, so long as you're religious. But as it happens, Huckabee is not alone here. This is the same argument that Kim Davis's lawyer made, and yes, that is his name, that Davis was being forced to choose between her religious belief and abandoning that belief to keep her freedom. So it seems like regardless of where our laws come from, whether they're deemed constitutional, passed by representatives, or left up to the states, if Christian conservatives don't like the law, we're going to get this speech one way or the other.
I'm not willing to spend one day under the tyranny of people who believe they can take our freedom and conscience away.
Well, looks like we finally found the source of this headache. This isn't about what laws mean or where they ought to come from. This is about whether or not religious people have to obey the law at all. In this particular tug of war, either homosexuals have the freedom to get married, or Christian conservatives have the freedom to take that freedom away. Either one group loses freedom or the other group loses freedom. Apparently. Well, the only way we're going to settle this is if we figure out what religious liberty is. So what is it? Well, some people would argue that religious liberty is a matter of being allowed to practice whatever religion you please, to believe in whatever you want, to worship whoever you want, and to publicly identify as a member of X without fear of being discriminated against, jailed, or even executed for what you believe. Now let's compare this to Kim Davis. Was she sent to jail for who she is or for what she did? Was she locked up for her beliefs or for her actions? Well, if she was jailed simply for what she believed, there are tens of millions of Christians in the United States who would have been sent to prison by now. No, Davis was not jailed because of her religion. She was jailed for her actions. She disobeyed the law. Now, of course, her religion was the motive for her actions, and that's worth taking into consideration, but having the right motive doesn't render your actions irrelevant. If a guy ran a red light because he was late for work, or, oh, well, here's one better, because his wife was in labor, well, that motive might have an effect on how severely he gets punished. It's at least a better motive than, who cares, YOLO.
See the red light back there?
But if he thinks he's getting off scot-free just as soon as he tells the judge he had a conscientious objection to stopping on red, he's got another thing coming. And for good reason. He could have caused a collision with another car.
What the f*** is wrong wrong with you?
However, driving is not in the Constitution, and the argument that a lot of Christian conservatives are making is that it's the First Amendment of the Constitution that grants religious people the freedom to, well, just freedom, really. You know what, let's leave Kentucky for a little while and travel to California, which, at the time this video was uploaded to the internet, is experiencing a terrible drought. Let's suppose there was a cult living in California that figured out a way to end this drought. Fairly simple practice. All they would need to do is sacrifice a virgin, and that's it. That's it, just kidnap a virgin, cut their chest open, pull out their heart, and then the rain will come. Are they allowed to do this? Well, there is a law against kidnapping, and there's another law against murder, not to mention surgical malpractice tends to bring about legal repercussions. But remember, what we're talking about here is religious liberty. At least we're taking this theory for a spin that religious liberty entails being allowed to break certain laws if you have a conscientious objection. So if that is the case, if religious liberty really means that a person can break a law anytime their religion leads them to believe that they're doing the right thing in spite of that law, well great. Now we've got a religious cult running around California killing teenagers, and apparently the Constitution protects them. No, this doesn't work. Maybe we're missing something. Let's get back to the Constitution and find out what the First Amendment really gives American citizens the right to do. Okay. It gives American citizens the right to peacefully protest. It allows them to express any idea or opinion they might have. It protects the press, and it makes sure that the government remains secular. And naturally, this means that American citizens can practice any religion they want. But it doesn't say anything here about religious people being allowed to abstain from secular laws. So which one of these outranks the other when they're not seeing eye to eye? If the answer is religion, if the laws of a country play second fiddle to the laws of a religion, why bother having laws in the first place? What good are these three branches of the federal government? What good are state governments? What good is the Bill of Rights? Or the Constitution for that matter? Why bother electing judges, or governors, or representatives, or senators, or presidents? Hell, what good is the vote? The only way that these things hold any value is if the law of the land applies to every single citizen. If it doesn't, none of this has any effect. Furthermore, don't you think the Founding Fathers would have noticed the irony of the supreme law allowing citizens to ignore the law? Don't you think that's just a little counterproductive? The entire point of having laws is to maintain a civilized society. If religious people can blow off whatever laws they please insofar as they can point to a passage in their holy book, society is not going to remain civil for very long. So unfortunately for Christian conservatives, religion is not some kind of hall pass. You still have to follow the law just like everyone else. Oh sure, you can still break the law if you really don't believe in it, but don't play the victim when you get arrested. Everyone who breaks the law gets in trouble. There's nothing special about Christians in this regard. But the good news is, civil disobedience is far from the only option on the table. If you live in a democratic republic, you can petition, protest, state your opinion or your arguments publicly. You can advocate for any law you want to replace it, vote for whoever you want. You can even run for office yourself. But as long as a law has been passed, enforced, and deemed constitutional, there needs to be consequences when that law is broken. And that's not tyranny. That's how we maintain a civilized society.
Life is a breeze when you're at ease. Life is work, you make it please. Be what you want to be, feeling wild and free. Make your dreams come alive. Every day is the first day of the rest of your life.
Let Kim go. But if you have to put someone in jail, I volunteer to go. Let me go. Lock me up. Let me go. Freedom. I'm willing to spend the next 8 years in jail. Lock me up. Let me go.
Worthy, worthy.
But I'm not willing to spend one day under tyranny. Lock me up, let me go. We gather here today to say freedom. We gather here today to say freedom. We gather here today to say freedom.